Let me ask you a question that's been argued over across more kitchen tables and tailgates than just about anything else on a homestead. Do you really need a mini excavator? Now, I've seen it go both ways, and both ways can hurt. I've watched a fella buy himself a shiny little track hoe in April, dig 2 holes with it, and then let it sit under a tarp behind the barn for 3 years while the mice built a city in the seat. And I've watched another fella rent a machine 4 separate times in one summer, pay delivery both directions every single time, and by August, he'd handed the rental yard darn near enough money to have bought a used machine outright. Both of them men were wrong, just in opposite directions. So today we're going to settle it. I'm going to give you the honest iron math on a mini excavator. Not the brochure math. Not the YouTube math, where a fella digs a pond in one afternoon with a big smile on his face and never mentions what that machine cost him. Real numbers, real repair bills, real hours, and the 4 mistakes that make almost everybody get this decision wrong. By the time we're done, you'll be able to sit down at your own table with a pencil and know whether you ought to buy one, rent one, or just call a fella with a machine and pay him to do it while you drink your coffee and supervise. Grab that coffee now. This one's about money, and it's about the kind of money that don't come back. Now, before we get into the mistakes, we got to lay the foundation. And the foundation is, what does one of these machines actually cost? Not payments, not monthly. What does it cost to own the thing? A little bitty mini excavator, we're talking 1 to 2 ton, the kind that'll squeeze through a gate and won't tear your yard all to pieces. Brand new off the dealer lot, you're looking at somewhere around $25,000 to $40,000, depending on the color and the options and how good you are at not saying yes to everything the salesman points at. Step up to a 3 to 4 ton machine, which honestly is a sweet spot for most homesteads, and new you're looking at $40,000 to $60,000. Get up around 5, 6 ton and you're in real money, 70 and up. Now used, that's where most of us actually live. A used 3 or 4 ton machine with 1,500, 2,000 hours on the clock, decent tracks, no leaks that'll embarrass you, that's generally somewhere in the $18,000 to $35,000 neighborhood. And here's something folks don't expect. These machines hold their value like a good mule. They do not depreciate like a truck. A 10-year-old mini excavator that's been treated right will still bring serious money. That's actually one of the best arguments for buying, and we'll come back to it. Now the rental side. A 3 to 4 ton machine rents for somewhere around $250 to $350 a day. A week is usually $800 to $1,200, and a month runs maybe $2,000 to $3,000. And listen close, because here's the part that bites. Delivery. That machine don't walk to your place. Delivery and pickup is going to run you anywhere from $150 to $350 each direction, depending on how far out in the sticks you live. And if you're like me and you live down a road the map ain't even sure about, it's the high end. And then there's the third option, which nobody talks about enough. Hire a fella. An operator with his own machine, insured, who knows what he's doing, runs about $100 to $175 an hour, sometimes with a half-day or a full-day minimum. Sounds expensive. Hold that thought, because that number is going to look a whole lot prettier by the end of this. So there's your 3 doors: buy, rent, or hire. Now let's talk about the 4 ways folks pick the wrong door. Mistake number 1, and this is the granddaddy of them all. Looking at the price of the machine and thinking that's the price of the machine. It ain't. Not even close. The machine is just the ticket to get in the building. Let me tell you about my neighbor. I'll call him Earl, on account of that's his name and he don't watch these videos anyhow. Earl comes rolling up my driveway one Saturday morning grinning like a possum in a persimmon tree. He'd bought himself a used 3-ton machine for $22,000. Good machine. Honest machine. He done all right on the buy. And then he says, "Can I borrow your trailer?" Now right there, friends, right there is mistake number one in the flesh. Because a 3-ton excavator with a bucket on it weighs around 7,000 pounds. And by the time you add the trailer itself, you are asking a whole lot of a little utility trailer with 2 rusty axles. Earl needed a real equipment trailer, 14,000-pound rating, ramps, brakes, the whole business. Used, if you're lucky and patient, 3,000. New, 5,000 to 7,000. That's not a small add-on. That's a fifth of what he paid for the machine. And then you need a truck that can pull it. And I don't mean pull it downhill on a dry day. I mean stop it coming down the far side of the ridge with a load on. That's 3/4 ton territory. Now, if you already got the truck, wonderful, you're ahead. But if you're sitting there doing this math with a 1/2 ton and a big dream, be honest with yourself. Then comes the attachments, and this is where a grown man's willpower goes to die. Because a mini excavator with just a bucket is a shovel. A mini excavator with attachments is a whole crew. A hydraulic thumb, which is that gripper that lets you pick up logs and rocks and brush instead of just nudging them around like a bored cat, runs 800 to 2,000 installed. And I'll tell you straight, if you're clearing land, the thumb ain't optional. It's the difference between the machine being useful and the machine being a toy. An auger for setting fence posts, 1,500 to 3,000. A hydraulic breaker, a hammer for busting rock and old concrete, 3,000 to 6,000. A grapple, a ripper tooth, a set of narrow trenching buckets, a grading bucket. Every one of them is real money, and every one of them is something you'll find yourself needing exactly one time on a Sunday when nothing's open. Now let's talk about what it costs just to sit there. Insurance, $200 to $500 a year if you carry proper coverage, and you ought to, because a machine sitting in a barn is a magnet for thieves who know exactly what it's worth. Diesel. That little machine burns maybe 1/2 gallon to 1.5 gallons an hour, depending on how hard you're working it. So figure $3 to $6 an hour in fuel. That part's cheap. That part's the only cheap part. Maintenance is where the real money hides. Oil and filters every couple hundred hours. Hydraulic fluid and filters. Grease. And then the wear items. Rubber tracks. And pay attention here. Rubber tracks are a consumable. They last maybe 1,200 to 2,000 hours if you're careful, and less than that if you spin them on gravel and turn sharp on pavement, which everybody does. A pair of rubber tracks cost you $1,500 to $3,000 installed. That's a fact of life, and it's why you don't go tearing around on your driveway showing off. And hydraulic hoses. Oh, the hoses. A hose is $100 to $300, and they never, not one time in the history of this world, have they blown out on a Tuesday morning when the parts store was open. They blow out on Saturday evening with a trench half dug and rain coming in. So Earl's $22,000 machine, by the time he had a trailer, a thumb, insurance on it, and a set of tracks 2 summers later, that man had $32,000, $33,000 in his $22,000 machine. The fix here is simple. Whatever the machine cost, add 30 to 50% for the iron tax. Trailer, attachments, insurance, first repairs. If you can't write that number down without your stomach turning over, you can't afford the machine yet. And that's fine. That's just information. Which brings us right into mistake number 2. And this one is the exact opposite sin. Renting, but renting stupid. Now don't get me wrong, renting is smart. Renting is often the right answer. But most folks do rental math wrong in 3 particular ways, and it costs them. First way, they figure the job by how long they think it'll take, not how long it actually takes. Every man alive figures a job will take 1 day. Every job takes 2.5. That's not pessimism. That's arithmetic from experience. Second way, they forget the learning curve is on the clock. If you have never run one of these machines before, your first 3 to 4 hours you are not digging. You are learning. You're figuring out that both hands do two things at once, that the boom, the stick, the bucket, and the swing all live on different joysticks, and that the machine will happily tip itself if you swing a full bucket out sideways on a slope. Every hour of that education is being billed to you at rental rates. On a $200 day, you just paid $100 to learn which lever does what. Third way, and this is the sneaky one. They forget the day you can't use. Machine gets delivered Friday evening. Saturday it rains 4 inches. Sunday the ground's soup and you'd do more harm than good. Monday morning, here comes the truck to pick it up. You just paid a weekend rental plus $250 in delivery for the privilege of looking at a yellow machine through your kitchen window. Let me put honest numbers on it. Say you got a real job. You want to run a water line 300 feet, dig footings for a pole barn, and pull about a dozen stumps. That's a genuine 4 to 5 day job for a fella of average skill. Rental, $1,100 for the week. Delivery both ways, $300. Fuel, $40. So $1,440, give or take, for a week of machine. Now do that 4 times in 1 year, because that's what actually happens once you get a taste for it. You start seeing projects everywhere. Suddenly that culvert bothers you. That's around $5,700 a year in rental. 2 years of that, and you have spent $11,000, and you own precisely nothing. Not a bolt, not a trackpad. And that right there is the honest, real argument for buying. It ain't that owning is cheap. It's that renting stops making sense past a certain point. The fix on renting is this. Be brutally honest about how many days a year you actually need a machine. Then rent by the week instead of the day, whenever the week costs less than 4 days, which it usually does. And stack your jobs. Don't rent for one project. Make a list, keep that list all year, and when the machine comes, you knock out 6 things while it's sitting in your yard. Same delivery fee, 6 jobs done. That's how you win at renting. Now, mistake number 3, and this one's about the machine itself. Buying the wrong size. And folks miss in both directions, but they miss small more often than they miss big, because small is cheaper and small feels safer. Here's the trouble with too small. A 1-ton machine is a wonderful thing for what it is. It'll fit through a 36-inch gate. It won't tear up your grass. It'll dig a nice trench for a water line or a drain. But it will not pull a real stump. It just won't. You'll sit there for 45 minutes picking at a hackberry stump like a buzzard on a fence post, and that stump will win. Because digging power comes from weight. The machine has to have something to push against, and that something is its own carcass sitting on the ground. I watched a young fellow one time try to pull a mature oak stump with a machine that had no business being in that fight. That machine lifted itself clean off the ground on the back end, tracks up in the air like a dog rolling over, and set back down with a thump that made both of us quiet for a second. Machine wasn't hurt. His pride was. And that stump is still there to this day, near as I know, with a little dirt collar around it like a monument. Now, too big has its own set of problems, and they're less obvious. A 6-ton machine will dig anything you point it at, sure, but can you haul it? 6 tons plus a trailer is heavy enough to need serious truck and, depending on where you live, a different license class or at least a whole lot more care. Can it get where you need it? It won't fit between the house and the fence. It won't fit through the orchard rows, And a big machine on soft ground makes ruts you'll be fixing next spring. For most homesteads, the honest answer is 3 to 4 ton. That size will reach 10, 12 feet deep. It'll pull most stumps, it'll load a dump trailer, it'll grade a driveway, and you can still haul it without needing a commercial outfit. It's the size that says yes to the most jobs.
But here's the better way to think about it, and this is the part I want you to remember. Don't pick the size by the biggest job you can imagine. Pick the size by the jobs you'll do the most, and hire out the 2 or 3 jobs a decade that need something bigger. Because that's the thing. If you're digging a real pond, an honest pond, not a puddle, you don't want a mini excavator at all. That's a job for a fellow with a big machine who'll show up and do in 2 days what would take you 3 weeks of weekends and a lot of cussing. Renting the right tool for the big job and owning the right tool for the everyday job, that's the whole game. And now, mistake number 4. And this is the one that empties wallets while everybody smiles. Believing you'll use it as much as you think you will. I call it the honeymoon hours. Here's how it goes. First month you own that machine, you are a man possessed. You dig a trench you didn't need, you move a rock pile from one side of the pasture to the other, and then, honestly, back. You pull stumps you'd made peace with 15 years ago. You grade a spot for a shed you have not designed. Your wife looks out the window and sees a middle-aged man having the best time of his life covered in mud, and she leaves you to it because it's cheaper than a boat. That first month you might put 30, 40 hours on the machine. Month 4, 6 hours. Month 7, 2. The big stuff's done, and that's the honest truth about a homestead. The heavy digging work is front-loaded. You've got a big pile of it when you first develop a place, and then it drops way off to maintenance. The culvert here, the drainage ditch there, the burial for the old dog, a few fence posts. Now I want to give you the test. This is the whole video in one number. So if you write down nothing else, write this. Figure your honest annual hours. Not your first year hours, your steady state hours, year 3 and beyond. Take how much you'd spend renting for that same amount of work. Then compare it against owning. And the way you figure owning is like this. What you paid, minus what you could sell it for in 5 years, divided by 5, plus insurance, plus maintenance, plus fuel. Let's run it. Say you buy that used 3-ton machine for $24,000. 5 years later, it's worth, let's be realistic, $18,000. Because as I said, these hold value beautifully if you don't abuse them. That's $6,000 of depreciation over 5 years, $1,200 a year. Add insurance, $300. Add maintenance and wear items averaged out, and I'd say $800 to $1,200 a year is honest if you're putting real hours on it, because tracks and filters and a hose or 2 add up. Call it $1,000. Add fuel, maybe $150 for a light year. So your all-in cost of ownership is roughly $2,600 to $2,800 a year. Let's say $2,700. Now, if you'd rent it instead, 1 week a year at $1,440 all in, you'd spend $1,440. Renting wins. Clear as day. 2 weeks a year, $2,880. Now it's a coin flip, and the coin's landing on its edge. 3 weeks a year or more, owning wins, and it wins bigger every year after. So there's your line. About 2 to 3 weeks of machine time a year, which is somewhere around 80 to 120 hours, is where buying starts making real sense. Under that, you are buying convenience, not savings. And I want to be plain, convenience is a legitimate thing to buy. Just know what you're buying. Now let me tell you what don't show up in that math, because I'd be a liar if I only gave you the numbers. The best thing about owning a machine ain't the money. It's Tuesday, it's 6 in the evening. Because here's what happens on a homestead. Your water line springs a leak. Not a big one, a little one. out in the yard where the ground's gone soggy.
Now, if you don't own a machine, that's a phone call, a wait, a schedule, maybe a week of a wet spot getting worse and your water bill climbing. If you do own a machine, you walk out after supper, fire it up, and 40 minutes later, you're looking at your own pipe with a flashlight. That is worth something. I won't put a dollar on it because it's different for every man, but it's worth something. Same with a tree across the drive after a storm, or a culvert that plugged up in a downpour, or a hole that needs filling before somebody's ankle finds it. Owning means you go do it right now. Renting means you go do it eventually. And I'll give you the other side of that too, in fairness. Owning also means you're the mechanic. When that hose blows, no rental yard is bringing you another machine. It's you, in the mud, with a flashlight in your teeth, trying to remember which fitting size you need. That's part of the deal. You don't get one without the other. Let me tell you about the day I learned what I actually bought. I'd had my machine maybe 2 months. I was digging out a spot for a new spring box, and I hit a rock. Not a rock, a boulder. The kind of rock that ain't a rock, it's the top of the earth's shoulder. I worked around that thing for the better part of a day, chained it, pried it, dug under it, and finally got it to roll over one time. Just once. And I sat back in that seat, sweating, with the engine idling, absolutely covered in glory. And it hit me. A man with a shovel does not get to have this day. A man who calls somebody would have missed it entirely. Now, was that efficient? Lord, no. A fellow with a bigger machine would have moved it in 10 minutes. But I learned my machine that day. Learned what it would do, what it wouldn't, and exactly how it feels right before it tries to pick its own self up off the ground. That knowledge is what makes owning worth it in year 2 and 3, when you're actually good at it. Which brings me to a thing I want to say plain because it's about your safety, not your wallet. These machines will hurt you. They're small, so folks treat them like a lawnmower, and they ain't. They tip over, especially on slopes, especially with a load swung out to the side. They roll off trailers when a man's in a hurry loading in the dark. They cut water lines, gas lines, and buried electric, and one of those 3 will kill you dead. So before you dig anything, call and get your utilities located. In the States, that's 811, and it's free. Free. There is no excuse. And when you're on a slope, keep your heavy work over the tracks, not out over the side. And when you load that trailer, take your time, chain it down at 4 points, and walk around it one time before you pull out. I have never once regretted the extra 5 minutes. I know 2 men who regret the 5 minutes they didn't take. All right, let me give you a few real situations so you can find yourself in here. Say you're on 2 or 3 acres. Mostly cleared, house is built, you got a garden, some chickens, maybe a small barn. Your honest machine needs are a drainage ditch, some fence posts, a little grading, maybe a stump every couple of years. That is not a buying situation, friend. That's 20, 30 hours a year at most. Rent a machine 1 week each spring, stack up your projects on a list all year long, and knock them all out at once. You'll spend $1,400 and go to bed happy. Now say you're on 10 to 20 acres and you're actively developing the place. Building fence, putting in roads and pads, running water lines to pastures, clearing brush, putting in a couple ponds worth of drainage. That's 200, 300 hours in your first 2 years, easy. Buy a used 3 or 4 ton machine with a thumb, and when you're done with your big push, sell it. Here's the beauty part. You might sell it for close to what you paid. You'll have essentially rented a machine for 2 years for the cost of maintenance and depreciation,
maybe $5,000 or $6,000, and you would have spent $20 renting that same time. That is the single smartest play in this whole business, and hardly anybody thinks of it. Now say you're on 40 acres or more with real infrastructure, roads, multiple buildings, livestock water, timber work. You need to own one. It ain't a question. The machine will pay for itself in a year and a half, and you'll wonder how you ever managed without it. And say you're on a nice half-acre in town with a big project once every 5 years. Hire the fella. Pay him his $150 an hour. He'll do in 6 hours what would take you 3 days. He'll do it right. He's insured if he breaks something, and you'll spend $900 and not own a trailer. And you can watch. Which, let's be honest, is most of the fun anyhow. One more piece of advice on buying used, since that's where most folks will land. Check the tracks first, before anything. Look for cracks, missing lugs, and steel cord showing through. If they're shot, that's $2,000 off the price right there, and don't let him tell you different. Then get under it and look for leaks. A little seep at a fitting, that's life. A pin wet with oil, that's a cylinder seal. Puddles are a walk away. Then work every function. Boom up and down, stick in and out, bucket curl, swing both ways, blade, and both tracks forward and back. You're feeling for anything slow, anything jerky, anything that drifts down on its own when you take your hand off. Drift means worn valves, and that's real money. Then check the pins and bushings. Wiggle that bucket side to side. If it flops around like a loose tooth, the pins are wore out. Fixable, but figure it in. Then look at the hours and be suspicious. 2,500 hours on a machine that's been greased every day is better than 800 hours on a machine that's been sat outside in the weather and rented to strangers. Look at how it's been kept, not just the numbers on the meter. A machine tells on its owner. Dirt in the grease points, mud caked in the undercarriage, a seat busted out. That all tells you the same story. And parts. Buy something you can get parts for. A great deal on an orphan machine from a brand nobody around you services is not a great deal. It's a lawn ornament with a 2-week wait on every filter. So let me put a bow on it. Here's what I'd do, plain as I can say it. I'd sit down and write out every digging job on my place for the next 3 years. Every one. Trenches, posts, stumps, pads, drainage, the whole list. Then I'd put honest hours beside each one and double it, because you always double it. If that comes out under about 80 hours a year, I'd rent. 1 week a year, stacked projects, and I'd put the money I saved into something that feeds me. If it came out over 120 hours a year, I'd buy used, 3 to 4 ton, with a thumb on it, and I'd get a proper trailer before I got a single attachment. If it came out somewhere in the middle, I'd look at that big front-loaded pile of work and I'd buy used, do my 2 years of heavy building, and then sell it and get most of my money back out. Best of both, and it's the play the smart ones make. And whatever I did, I'd call before I dug, I'd keep my heavy work over the tracks, and I'd take the extra 5 minutes chaining it down. A mini excavator ain't magic, and it ain't a mistake. It's a tool, and tools are worth exactly what you use them for. A machine that runs 150 hours a year on a working homestead is one of the best investments a fella can make. That same machine sitting under a tarp behind the barn is $30,000 of regret with mice living in it. So there you have it, what it really costs, the 4 mistakes that get folks wrong, and the honest number that tells you which door to walk through. It ain't about having the biggest iron on the road. It's about having the right tool for the work that's actually in front of you. If this helped you figure your own math, do me a favor and hit that like button. It truly helps this little channel grow. And if you ain't subscribed yet, come on and join us. I put out honest, down-to-earth homestead advice every week straight from the farm. No brochure talk. And tell me down in the comments, do you own a machine, rent one, or hire it out? And what's the one job that finally made up your mind? I read every one of them. Now get on out there and go dig something, but call before you do.
That's all for today, folks. If this helped you for your farm, hit the like button, subscribe for more honest farm advice, and I'll see you next time, right here from the farm.